All right, welcome back. Another episode of The Hard Sell. As always, I'm your host, Joel Stevenson. And this week we've got a great guest. And this is a little bit of a continuation of a conversation we had on Eric's podcast, which we'll link in the show notes, which you should definitely check out. This week we've got Eric Quantrom, who is Chief Marketing Officer at CIENCE Technologies. Eric's been a marketing leader for a number of years, and for the last 6 years has helped CIENCE be a 4-time Inc. 5000 B2B lead generation and marketing leader, passionate about brands, sales opportunities, and a little bit of a sales and marketing tech wonk, I'd say, based on some conversations we've had in the past. So, Eric, welcome to the show.
Well, it's great to be here, Joel. Thanks for having me and returning the favor, if you will. You were a great guest on our pod. So
yeah, hopefully I haven't tanked your ratings too much, but
and hopefully I won't do the same.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe we'll be mutually assured destruction or something.
Right.
Maybe Eric, for folks that don't know about CIENCE, you just want to just give us a little bit of a thumbnail about what you guys do over there, just so folks have some context.
Yeah, fun thing about CIENCE is that we help others grow, and that's really the best simple way that I can phrase it. We create software and services. Traditionally, we're known as a services company, outsourced SDR, BDR type of function. But over the last year plus, we've also built out a software stack, starting with the data piece of the puzzle, which is so critical to any campaign that you're going to run, and then all the other tools to compile and complete messaging, engagement, even website tools that we can use to help at kind of the moments of truth when leads are sourcing or otherwise interested in your brand, all leading towards top of the funnel appointment setting and booked meetings, which then the vast majority of our customers we represent as them in their sales cycles, if you will. So we're building pipeline as their organization, and then ultimately, when successful, really moving the needle on net new business created for those companies. So
yeah, we've seen this model work really well for folks. I've seen it in a number of different environments where people they don't understand this space, or like the way that they're approaching it right now is not performing. They need just something totally different. So it's definitely a model that folks should check out if they haven't tried it, or they're seeing some things that maybe aren't working quite as well in their funnel. Sometimes it's interesting to get just a totally different approach in the door, and then kind of a nice neat wrapper.
It's funny too. One of the things that I've always had a long-held belief, even prior to CIENCE, about is that outbound as kind of a go-to-market strategy can be very supplemental, can be very applied when necessary, or applied to new product launch, new geography targeted, new anything, like even new ideas for types of campaigns to be run. And I oftentimes see we like to label the world and bucket it, if you will, into flavors of outbound. The vast majority of the world does, what I think I would call list-led outbound, where you go and you obtain a data source, or you have names in your CRM, or ultimately you're working your way down some form of list. And that is what 5% of the public marketing and sales teams collaborate on when they're running outbound campaigns. But the more exciting areas to get into, and that I think maybe we even unpack these and talk about it on this show, are getting off of just lists and moving more towards a world where you can start to identify buying signals while they're happening and start running intent-led outbound and inbound-led outbound type campaigns, which for my money are oftentimes never ran for most companies to their detriment.
Yeah, sort of, spear fishing versus dragnet fishing, if you will.
Or using that exact same analogy, breaking out that spear in the dragnet that you already have, known as inbound.
Yeah.
Dragging out that spear in the dragnet known as kind of like, depending on how you look at the problem, intent data that exists kind of like on the open web that you could take advantage of for people that are in the market for your products and services currently.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And I think, all of this, more targeted approaches are starting to come to the forefront. I mean, I think maybe the internet or the LinkedIn was maybe a little bit slow to wake up to this announcement, but I've seen quite a bit about it lately where Google has announced, I think Yahoo is sort of, tag team with them on this, that if you are a sender that sends more than 5,000 messages a day, that you have to have proper, sort of authentication, and you need to, there's a couple other hoops you got to jump through. And then, but I think that the big kicker is that if you get more than, I think it's 0.3% of your messages marked as spam, then you go into the penalty box. And so I'm just sort of curious, like your take on this and how you think it's going to affect strategies, kind of now and in the future.
One of my takes on this is going to be a very irreverent one, which is Google, what took you so long?
Right, exactly. I mean, it's going to help their advertising business, right? It's like, duh.
Well, it's funny because they have a significant market share. I mean, it's a 2-horse race on the email client used side for most B2B businesses. You're either an Outlook shop and using Microsoft tools or 365, or you're a Google shop and you're using Gmail and the Google suite of apps. And so just focusing on Google for a second, like their view into the second side of a two-sided market, essentially all of those people that are using Gmail at their workplace and, mark as spam, they can see those numbers, and they have for, frankly, like a long time, over a decade.
Right.
So to me, there's not a ton new under the sun here. And one of the things that if I were to fast forward to, like, okay, so Google made these announcements, what should we do about it? Well, what I think you should do, to anyone listening, is get back to basics. If you're worried about, getting marked as spam, then use techniques and strategies that will preclude that from happening. Cold email is such that if you spend the time and you actually are doing your homework, the phrase of that I happen to love is "show me you know me." When thinking about prospecting, you're going to watch, very few of your cold emails go to that, untimely marked as spam death.
Right. Yeah. I would say, like, I obviously get a lot of various solicitations, and I am not, maybe it's cruel that I'm in this business and I do this, but like when I just see like poor messages, I will ruthlessly mark them as spam. But I've never done it to anyone that I think has put even a modicum of effort towards trying to personalize that. It's like that to me is, there is an honor amongst thieves type of thing that you wouldn't do in that case. But it's like, if you're going to put no time and effort into it, like, I'm going to try to pay it forward to somebody else that doesn't have to spend 10 seconds processing something and marking it as such.
It's so funny. I've had this exact same conversation with multiple people, including on our podcast, and everyone feels the exact same, which is like, I like the phrase honor amongst thieves, but I think that executives the world over, respect the hustle. They respect when people are taking the time to, put them on a pedestal, do their homework about them, reach out and start with them. It's really hard to actually dislike somebody that goes to the effort of doing what Dale Carnegie coined almost 100 years ago when he said, to be interesting, be interested.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of wired into our human DNA or into our mammalian brains that when others are taking the time to be interested in you, those are not the kinds of times when people are mark as spam, shut people down, don't engage. In fact, just the opposite. We live in a world on the prospecting or cold outbound side of the fence where, moving the needle on small single-digit percentages makes all the difference in the world. There's some people that attack that problem through pure volume, and they want to just get out there and send as many messages to as many people as possible. And the truth of the matter is and I say this purely subjectively because I'm like you, I get a ton of cold email every single day. Cold calls.
Yeah, chief marketing officer title will do that.
Right. especially when people know you hold X amount of budget.
Yeah.
You're on everybody's favorite, Christmas wish list, so to speak, to buy their shit.
Yeah. Right.
pardon my blue language there, but like at the end of the day, what I can say absolutely authoritatively, but subjectively, is that my inbox is colored with people that really didn't try that hard. And me as an executive can recognize an email that went out to 100 or 1,000 people, like from a mile out. I can see it all day long.
Yeah, I think there was a period of time, I want to say it was maybe about a decade ago, where like some of these like predictable revenue tactics where it's like you email every VP in the company and say like, who's the person I need to talk to about this? And somebody gets back to you and says, talk to this person. And then you're like, oh, this person intro, whatever. I don't know, like everybody's seen stuff like that so many times now that unless maybe you're like a brand new executive from Mars or something, it just seems like a lot of that stuff is it's kind of amazing to me that it keeps happening. Like people haven't gotten beaten down enough from failure that they haven't tried new things yet.
You know what's funny about that is the concept behind what I've taken to calling best contact. Like that's kind of the rubric of what you're using. The kind of like the thinking, if you unpack it, actually isn't wrong. Triggering the help instinct in an individual, right? Because take your average company, right, that's over a few hundred people, not to mention companies that are over 1,000 or over 10,000. The likelihood of anyone outside that company knowing exactly who the right person to talk to about X, Y, or Z is exceptionally low.
Right.
And most human beings can understand that on its face. However, where I think that, we've just evolved, and I think this is the natural kind of like tendency of most things in life, is you start with kind of like that shallow surface, like, are you the right person to talk to about lead generation at your company? And after people have seen it enough times, they realize, oh, okay, well, they're just using the shallow, like the bar keeps going up from the recipient side, like, because once you've seen best contact methodology used on you, it fatigues you. And you're like, yeah, I answered the first few of these like years ago. And now I'm just not in the mood anymore to help people out. However, I think that, if you thought about best contact and you said, I want to make a best contact campaign work, I think that the onus now in that raised bar scenario is, how could I demonstrate to the individual that I'm writing to that I've done my homework and had a hypothesis of why I thought they were the best contact. And then, get to that same place of triggering in the human brain, like, well, is it you?
Right.
And if not, like, I've done the homework where you could at least help me out and point me in the right direction in your oh so large organization that I'm not a part of.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think that's a good distinction, because again, it's like, if you're on the receiving end of that message, I feel like oftentimes you will recognize, I think especially if you're in any sort of a commercial side of the house, I think sometimes, I would still say that R&D leaders can be like particularly curmudgeonly on some of these things. It can be quite difficult versus, some of the other folks that recognize that, hey, we do the same thing with our customers kind of thing, and, throw somebody a bone. But yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, is that it's like, at least the person knows that you're giving a sincere effort. You're not, they didn't blind copy, 50 other executives at the company.
Totally. And again, back to the human side of this, at the end of the day, if you're using any outbound strategies, one of the key variables that I think is so important to lean on and to index it into is it is one-to-one outreach. It's different than, say, a marketing email, which again is like highly designed HTML, more often than not coming from an address that says no reply at.
Yeah.
And is meant for, kind of like blast media, is meant for thousands of people all in one fell swoop. Outbound is meant to be that kind of difference to that. It's me to you. It's not mass media at all. And when people lose sight of that, or they forget that that's kind of the rubric that all of this stands on, you see a lot of, I think, things go wrong. I think you get a lot of delete, you get a lot of market spam, you get a lot of people ignoring you and otherwise just tuning out.
Yeah. Right. What if, you were mentioning earlier intent data, and, let's say somebody they still wanted to do outbound, but instead of, sort of, just kind of pulling a list, or or starting with some specific demographic, if they use some tool that sort of said, well, here are the people that we think are in market for what you're doing? Like what are some of the interesting data sources that you see out there now that you think could that people should be looking at to try to maybe start from a more qualified place than just strictly sort of random chance?
The most interesting intent data is the intent data that you as a business leader, marketing leader, sales leader throw off from your own web properties. So, let me paint a picture. In the 21st century, everyone has a website, public website. Most marketers I know, most CMOs, my brethren, if you will, spend a lot of their time on that website, attracting people to that website, investing in techniques to get people onto a website. In fact, we even have, the words around pay per click to a website. That's a very common go-to-market strategy that we can enable. And yet the fundamental problem that happens with virtually every website everywhere in the world, and the numbers are literally not changing and haven't for, frankly, decades, is that of 100 people you attract to your website, 97 to 99% of them are going to essentially come to your site, visit a page or five, turn around, hit the back button, go away silently. And that's normal. However, if you thought about it kind of slightly differently, especially for B2B companies out there, that signal, that intent of them coming to your website is oftentimes the first, kind of like, if I were to use an analogy, like they're circling above. They're trying to learn about your company, your industry, the problems you solve. This is what buyers do. They do their homework, they do their research. They spend a lot of time with Google and a lot of time kind of like trying to figure something out. And Gartner and Sirius and Forrester and everybody else has been saying this for forever. Buyers don't engage on the first visit. They don't engage until very later on in the buy cycle. And to me, that represents the biggest possible opportunity for the company that wants to pay attention to this activity happening essentially in their own backyard, their own website, to say, okay, what am I doing with the 99% of people that didn't convert, but that went to my website? And that's the most interesting intent signal, I think, in the market today and will be in the future, given the state of play and even rationalizing investment costs for those unique visitors that you've brought to your site on the marketing side. Because ultimately marketing is being judged by how effective they are at essentially turning those visitors into sales pipeline, into close one business.
Yeah, it almost goes back. It goes to some of these early web. I remember was it Avinash Kaushik who wrote the web analytics in 2 minutes a day or whatever it was. And
Occam's razor.
Yeah, he talked a lot about this idea of why did the person come to your website, and try to figure out the buckets of reasons that people came to your website. And then you can start to segment the people, you can start to identify, and then that then leads to some sort of an interesting funnel. Once you have sort of, tried to get some idea of intent, and it might be that somebody visited a particular page. It might be they did something in a particular order. Maybe they answered a question about why they were there. But it seems like that's a much more, especially now, a much more interesting place to start from, than a cold. Have you actually exhausted that information resource before you go and, throw down, 10 grand for a list?
And what's funny about it? And I've talked to a lot of even really large organizations and their CMOs about what they're doing in this area. And honestly, I get a lot of absolutely nothing type of answers. Hey, are you running inbound led outbound campaigns? What's that? Where people are kind of well, I take my inbound traffic that doesn't convert and I retarget them. Yeah. And that's usually where it stops. And I think that there's a significant case, and obviously CIENCE has a dog in this hunt, where I think the start place is to de-anonymize that traffic, understand who is visiting your site, not just at the company level, but even down to the contact level, which is a tool that we've built and have in market. But once you do that, then you can start to compare them to your ICP. so that you can basically say, all right, 99% or 97 or whatever that number is of my traffic that's not converting, how much of that can I de-anonymize? How much, what do my match rates look like? And then of that percentage, who of those people would I say, oh yeah, that's in my ideal customer profile? In other words, the same criterion that I would use if I were running just a list-led outbound campaign and spinning up that list and then having my SDRs work that patch.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that there's a time element to this that is ultra crucial, because I like to think of things from the sales perspective as well, which is to say this. If I told you that an anonymous person was, kind of like learning about your particular areas of promise, your buying space, if you will, and I said to the sales team and anyone on it, would you rather have that person as your first, be the first vendor in the buy cycle, or any other time afterwards?
Mm-hmm.
7 days a week and twice on Sunday, every single AE on the planet is going to choose, I want to be the first one in.
Mm-hmm.
I want to set the agenda. I want to be the first vendor they talk to. I want to be the one who, frankly, even has a chance to block others out in a sales cycle.
Right.
And so that kind of mentality, doubly, or maybe to the power of whatever, gives you the rationale of saying, okay, well, I should be running inbound-led outbound motions as the number one lead priority, no matter what, in my business. And I think you can even do this even if you don't have millions of people hitting your website every day. I think you can make this motion work even with what I would call relatively low traffic.
Yeah, we've seen success with this, from doing it in sort of the way that you've described, but also, we have a product-led motion. So people start the trial like you. So we get intense signals about how we're using the product and who is this person and have they shared it with somebody else? Do we see, a couple of data points? Is a company demographic a good demographic? And those are powerful signals. I mean, not everybody has a product-led motion that is instrumented in such a way that allows that. But even if you don't, as you said, there's a reason, it's kind of like the old, what was it, the Glenn Ross, nobody buys on the lot unless they want to buy the car, kind of thing.
So true.
I mean, I imagine someone could randomly end up on the CIENCE website, looking for, quantum physics research, but it seems unlikely.
It's highly unlikely. My running joke, and by the way, I think what we're talking about here are the Glengarry leads.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
That's right. That's right.
So for those who have seen the movie or the play, these are the best leads that you could potentially get. I don't know. I'm of the mind, and I come at things from a marketing standpoint, and I just think about, having all of your ducks kind of moving in the same direction in a row is a really effective marketing technique, because what I'm also witnessing on the other side of the fence is more and more, and I think this trend will only exacerbate, especially with tools like generative AI, it's becoming harder and harder to attribute true source to any website visit.
Totally.
So my running joke with with you, since you just brought it up, is yeah, did people come to the CIENCE website seeking the best summer reading on the beach, the latest Grisham novel? No. They're clearly, in a space down a funnel, if you will, looking for something in the realm of lead generation, some way, shape, or form. And so figuring out what type of, search that is and where did it come from is a really hard marketing challenge, and one that is a noble cause always, because you want to ultimately develop and cultivate sources and, double down on all those that are working to bring you traffic, whether that be organic, paid, referral, what have you, social, understanding where those sources are and then cultivating them also means that if you have an inbound-led outbound motion, you could be attacking from multiple levels. You can be, kind of maximizing is probably the best word to use for it, all of your inbound traffic, not just those that chose to fill out a form on that visit that happened to create that MQL.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's some obviously investments you got to make to figure out what's going on and get some telemetry and put some systems in place. But are folks like you guys, I imagine, that can help people with that. And there aren't a lot of green fields left out there, but if you haven't taken steps like this is, I think, a pretty high payoff one that you could do. No matter what the market is.
Well, and here's the other side of the coin. And I always like to think of it from, kind of, can I walk a mile in somebody else's shoes? From the buy side, what I think most buyers go through nowadays, and I have this running thesis in my own head as CMO, from multiple companies and currently at CIENCE, I think it's harder to buy than sell. And I'll just be honest about it. Like, I think most people never go to buying class. There's no buying school. Most corporations, unless there's an actual procurement department, and that usually only exists in the largest of enterprises, don't have any kind of professional buying training. Most buying exercises come about very ad hoc, very random, very, very much led by, pain points or need or budget renewal cycles that, kind of people almost like coalesce around the buy cycle when it catches momentum. And so because of that and the overwhelming amount of choice that we have in our markets today, and if you don't believe me, just go look at, if there's B2B listeners, and we're both part of it, right? Like the marketing maps, the MarTech stack, what is it, 10,000?
That's a big number.
Yeah, so I could interview all the vendors in my category and do all of my homework to make a wise buying decision and be done sometime in 2035.
Right.
So I think people are drowning in information, and buying is actually a really challenged activity because of, the consensus nature that most organizations attack it from. So if I think about it from the buy side and all of those types of struggles that are just latent, inherent, clear and unavoidable trends, what would make the most sense for me as a vendor to be, kind of like bringing forward to attack that problem that exists for people that I may want to have buy from me? Well, I can meet them where they're at. I can help kickstart and have a lot of my sales function be essentially synthesis making. I can help make sense of a lot of overwhelming information. And again, if I'm the first person in to that sales cycle, I give my sales reps a fighting chance for doing exactly that.
There was a survey that I remember from years and years ago, when I was a seller, that we had as part of a sales training. And I don't know how rigorous it was, or how replicatable it was, but the survey had to do with, like, okay, we surveyed all these enterprise buyers and we asked them, like, what do you want the salesperson to do? And it's like a lot of people are like, well, explain the product, but I think the number one thing for an enterprise buyer was help me navigate my organization, actually, which was very surprising to me when I heard it. But it after years of doing this, it rings true, I think, for many of the reasons that you just articulated.
It's so true, because oftentimes organizations will use the purchase as a catalytic event for themselves. Like, I don't know, throw out a stupid simple example, right? Like a company that has come to the conclusion or decides they want a new CRM or a new ERP or whatever. I picked two software off the top of my head, but like, if all of a sudden there's a momentum in that company around change, and that change is represented by buying services, software, or solutions of some sort, then why wouldn't it be, a full change management exercise with all the trappings, with all of the, like, hey, salesperson, help me, get the CFO on board that this is a wise investment so that we can do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, sure, there's going to be a cost associated with it. And our CFO is very narrow, is very much looking at that spending of money. But here's what we're looking at from an ROI perspective. Help me make that case. All of a sudden now, I actually think that you bringing up that point is one of the other reasons that I kind of love sales. And I think it can be very noble of purpose, where you can help people achieve a better tomorrow through your own efforts of helping, others reach their goals.
Right. Yeah, I've got a SaaS CEO friend of mine who likes to say that you don't have product market fit in the enterprise if you can't get people promoted that buy your product.
Yeah, I love that dimension too, because, you know, going back to the my mini little thesis here on buying harder than selling, most people kind of don't want to acknowledge this, especially not directly because it makes people uncomfortable, but especially B2B buying is highly emotional. And it can have a lot of impacts. It can be, you know, even down to you make the wrong purchase with something, it can be a career limiting move.
Yeah.
You know, you can be associated as the guy who bought, you know, oh my God, there's the guy who bought that really crappy blah, blah, blah. You know, oh, there's the guy that led the charge for us to hire this vendor, you know. And sorry for all my male references, but you know, ultimately people wear stuff too. And that emotionality, um, you know, again, it rarely comes up, but it's very material and real as to why anyone purchases anything in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's an interesting point of view, and I think I think if you now more than ever, if you can adopt some of these principles about putting yourself in your buyer's shoes and really helping them make sense of the world and showing up when they need you to show up and not really when you're not wanted, you're probably going to achieve better results. So, there's another few hours probably on this topic we could go, but
Minimum.
we're running out of time here for this one. But Eric, if you want to, be in touch or learn more about CIENCE, what are some good ways to do that?
Yeah, sure. So CIENCE is an intentional misspelling of the word. So CIENCE.com. You can find out all of our, again, products and and process and people type of offerings. Me personally, I'm the easiest target there is because there's relatively few Quantroms in the world. My own last name was changed with ancestors that came through Ellis Island, and they were Swedes, and there's no Quanstroms with a Q in Sweden. So,
oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Little backstory, I guess. But ultimately, I'm on LinkedIn, and a lot of people seem to find me there.
Well, Eric Quantrom with a Q, thanks for being on the show, and we will hopefully talk to you soon.
Sounds great. Joel, thanks for having me. This was a fun discussion.
Bye now.